that we can have further discussion after the presentation. Okay. Okay, I hope that you can see the slide. Okay, I prepared a few slides just for for your.
Yes, we can see the slide, Doctor.
All right, very well. Okay, so when we talk about gap of study, first let us be clear about this. Okay, there are so many different school of thoughts with regard to research gap. Okay, some feels that research gap is the most important thing in a postgraduate study, especially if you're doing masters by research or if you're doing PhD. But there are also a school of thought who believe that the gap of study is not that significant in a research. But later on, I will share with you why gap of study is so important and what does it constitute, so that you can actually differentiate later on whether you're supposed to have a gap of study or not. Okay, but as for now, I'm just going to share with you, okay, some of my experience, okay, when we talk about searching for a gap in the study. Okay, so we will be discussing, okay, more to what is the gap of study, why research gap is important, identifying research gap, okay, difference between research gap and problem statement, and writing and visualizing a research gap. Okay, it's okay for you to, if you disagree, okay, because some universities or some scholars, okay, they have different view on this. Okay, so, and as well as the university on how they approach towards research. Okay, what is the gap in study? So everybody is talking about the gap. When we come across a postgraduate student, they are all talking about, okay, I cannot find the gap. I cannot find the gap. What is happening out there? Okay, so actually it is also considered as the missing piece, okay, or pieces in the research literature. So later, okay, at the end of the slide later on, I will share with you on how to actually visualize the research gap. But as for now, to understand, okay, in order to give you some authority to conduct research, okay, so you are actually searching for the missing piece, meaning that there must be something. So how do you search for that missing pieces? Okay, so and it is also known as area that has not yet been explored or underexplored. Okay, I don't like to say if you are asking me, okay, doctor, should I go with something that has not been explored or something that has not been done? Okay, that is almost like impossible. Okay, based on the fact that we are from social science. So social science is actually difficult to create new knowledge. Okay, something that is purely new. And in the philosophy of research itself, when we talk about doing research, we are talking about referring to past studies. We are talking about literature. We are talking about reference to other material that is already available. So that is one thing I think that need to be further discussed, because why? If you're talking about the science and technology, it is very clear and it is very apparent, meaning that if you mix one substance to another substance, so you get a new substance. So that is something new. But when we talk about research gap in social science, normally we refer to something that is underexplored. Okay, meaning that it is not being explored, it is not being empirically proved. Okay, so that gives a bit of authority for you to conduct research. Okay, and then it could be a population, a sample, type, size, location, research method, data collection or analysis, or other research variables or conditions. Okay, let me explain this. I think let me go in a mixed language. Okay, if you are talking about the gap of study, there are so many factors that can actually what we call contribute to what we call the gap of study. So if you're talking about something new, how can you actually work on your literature if that thing is new? So normally when we talk about gap of study and creating a new knowledge, normally it involves a qualitative study. Okay, but if you are talking about the existing literature, okay, So then you can actually conduct a quantitative study. Okay, and then the gap itself, like I mentioned to you, it can be in terms of population, it can be in terms of type of sample, it can be in terms of location, it can be in terms of methodology, data collection or analysis. So these differences or these what we call discrepancies give you some authority to conduct research, to explore more. Meaning that, for example, if somebody have already conduct such study in other geographical part, so now you bring that research in Malaysia, for example. The previous research was conducted in US or UK. So you bring the same topic in Malaysia. So in terms of the gap is related to the sample, or we call it contextual contribution. So the old study was done somewhere in Europe or US, but now you are actually exploring what is happening in the same nature of study, but in Malaysia. Okay, what is a theoretical gap? So this is one thing that I think most of us are really looking into. Because basically when we talk about social science, we are talking about reviewing literatures. Kita mengkaji articles, we are looking at journals, we are looking at past report and everything. So basically what we are doing is actually we are coming into what we call a theoretical gap. What have been done before? What have past researchers have already done? Okay, and how you actually review what have already been done and try to come to a point where there is a gap in the literature. So basically, it is a theoretical gap. Most of the social science studies are referring to this what so-called theoretical gap. So theoretical gap is an area for which theory falls short. Okay, which means also that no published theory has addressed the concerned area. So that is what we call a theoretical gap. So in contrast, literature gap covers theoretical gap in addition to empirical gap. Okay, saya rasa biar saya terangkan dalam bahasa Malaysia supaya senang faham. Apa yang kita lakukan di dalam social science ataupun sains sosial ini, kita melihat kepada literature atau kajian-kajian lepas. So dari kajian-kajian lepas itu, kita akan merumuskan satu keadaan atau satu situasi di mana ianya gagal dikenal pasti di dalam literature ataupun di dalam kajian-kajian yang lepas. So itu yang kita maksudkan tadi yang kita katakan theoretical gap. Okay. So research gap, why it is important? I will discuss this again later, okay, because I know there are some school of thought who believe that gap in the study is not important. Because why? Because you have your problem statement, you have your research question in place. So where do you put the gap of study? So research gap is a research question or problem which has not been answered appropriately or at all in a given field of study. Yang ini saya selalu kata dan I would like to share with you, okay, not only with the all the scholars but also the student. I always say this. When you read a journal, okay, ada antara kita yang tengah buat PhD ataupun sedang mencari tajuk untuk PhD dan sebagainya. Bila kita mencari tajuk ataupun kita mencari satu problem atau satu isu untuk dikaji, okay, we have to actually be clear. Okay, first and foremost is the area of study. So apa sebenarnya area kajian kita? So from that area of study, then you start to dwell into past studies. So what have people been done? What is already happened? What has already been studied? And what is currently happening? So dengan cara itu barulah kita boleh jumpa apa yang dikatakan tadi gap. Okay. The gap of study is either, macam saya cakap tadi, whether it is contextual, okay, whether it is in methodology, whether it is in sampling, okay, whether it is in hypothesis or whatever. So that gives you some authority to conduct further study. So apa yang kita cari sekarang di dalam, kalau kita bercakap tentang postgraduate study, especially those who are doing PhD, okay, and then the doctor can actually clarify this. Okay, We are actually trying to address a very small issue. Okay, sometimes it is not apparent at all. Benda tu kadang-kadang tak nampak pun sebenarnya. Tetapi kita akan buat satu pernyataan ataupun kita olah satu pernyataan berdasarkan kajian-kajian lepas supaya nampak seolah-olah ada satu kelopongan. Okay, meaning that there is a gap. There is an urgency to do that, to conduct that study. So identifying gaps and generating research questions can be regarded as the first and most important step in a research paper. Dia adalah step yang pertama. Okay. Mungkin akan ada yang terfikir, yang mana satu sebenarnya doktor, adakah kita perlu tengok gap dahulu ataupun kita perlu come up with a problem statement? Okay. The only difference is that when we talk about the problem statement, meaning that it's in statement form. But when we talk about a gap, okay, gap can come from any sources. It can come from sampling, like I mentioned to you. It can come from context. It can come from the methodology used before this. Itu semua boleh dikira sebagai gap. So nanti saya akan sharekan juga macam mana kita nak visualizekan gap tu supaya lebih jelas. So that it is clear and apparent that we can confirm that there is a small gap, okay, especially in the literature. Okay, how do you identify gaps? Of course, first and foremost, if you're doing a postgraduate studies, you're doing masters or a PhD. I think most of us are going towards PhD. Okay, what we are doing first is we need to read. That is the core, what we call exercise. Okay, you can only search for this gap or you can only generate issues or problem if you read. Meaning that you have to review all the literature. But the question is, to what extent? Okay, berapa jauh kita nak review literature ni? Adakah 5 tahun ke belakang cukup? Adakah 10 tahun ke belakang cukup? Atau adakah 15 tahun ke belakang cukup? So there is a big question mark. So normally, some of the advisors ataupun some of the scholars, okay, they prefer you to look into 5 years back. Maknanya 5 tahun ke belakang, mungkin 2 hingga 5 tahun ke belakang. Why we are talking about this period of time? Because we don't want you to actually study, or we don't want you to review literature which is no longer relevant. For example, currently people are talking about online learning. Why it is so important? Why it is the in thing now? Because we are experiencing this pandemic of COVID-19. So the focus shift, okay, from instead of just looking at the academic world in its normal setup, now we have shift our interest towards the research on online learning. How online learning can actually contribute, how online learning can actually sustain, how online learning can actually influence student performance. So that is the in thing. So come to the literature, why we need our advisees as PhD student to read 2 to 5 years period backward is because we don't want you to do something that is obsolete, that is irrelevant. Tapi okay, ada pula yang akan kata, jadi macam tu saya tak bolehlah pakai jurnal yang diterbitkan 10 tahun yang lepas. No, you still can. But the issue must be current. Okay, the issue must be current. And for those who are eyeing a scholarship, nak minta scholarship untuk menyambung ke peringkat PhD dan sebagainya, you must relate to the current state. You must relate to the current policy. Apa yang sebenarnya dicari, okay, oleh kerajaan? Apa yang sebenarnya dasar yang baru diletakkan oleh kerajaan? For example, last 3 years we are talking about entrepreneurship. So everybody is doing all these entrepreneurship studies and so on. Why? Because that is the in thing. The government wants to produce more entrepreneurs. Okay, and now if you're talking about now, what are we looking at? We are looking at the way to handle pandemic. We are looking at crisis management. We are looking at online learning. So everybody is into this. So that is why we want you to read the current. But you still can refer. For example, most of the theories, they come from like 1950 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. So still you need to go back and refer to the origin. Meaning that, yes, your issue or the problem at hand is current, but the reference made or the theoretical, what we call representation, itu masih lagi yang lama. Tapi janganlah you ambil journal yang 2012, 2010, 2009, which is very old. So it is no longer relevant, okay? And then you should actually think whether you have really go into that literature. Dah habis ke belum? Is it exhaustive? Okay, so that is one thing during my days doing my PhD. My advisor is so keen on this. Okay, every time you come up with your write-up, your literature, the same question arise. Have you made sure that it is really exhaustive? Dah baca semua ke? Kan? Dah habis ke baca? Sampai mana you baca? Berapa banyak you baca? Okay, so itu persoalan very subjective. Okay, so you have to be smart. Because if you're talking about the social science, every time you search for a topic, there will be millions of hits. Banyak, terlalu banyak. Jadi boleh ke takkan saya nak baca semua doktor 100,000, sejuta? No, you must be aware, okay, every time when you go into the literature search or literature review, okay, you have to understand which one is relevant to your study. Okay, as long as the theoretical is there, meaning that dia ada dia punya sokongan, dia support dia, so it is sufficient enough, meaning you don't have to read all. Okay, and then your goal should be to find a space or opening for contributing new research. Okay, this is something yang saya rasa patut kita bincangkan dengan lebih orang kata mendalam. If you were thinking of doing a new study, totally new, so that is what I said just now. Kalau kita buat benda yang baru, di mana nak dapat literaturenya? So kalau you refer to Sekaran, you refer to Varapan, you refer to Zygmunt, you refer to all the research book, normally research is done on the work of others. Okay, but you bring something new. Itu yang kita masukkan, new research, something new. It's not something new to meaning that tak pernah orang buat. Kalau tak pernah orang buat, takkanlah you akan dapat literature. You will not get enough literature to support. Okay, but if you're doing it qualitatively, meaning that it is exploratory in nature, so that might be possible. Okay, but again, the difference between the quantitative and qualitative research, okay, is far to be discussed. Okay, and then the first step is gathering broad range of research articles on your topic. So I think if you ask Dr. Fadli, if you ask Dr. Siti Norma, and even Dr. Dawson, and all the doctors, Dr. Kawailun is also in here, Dr. Mastura is in here, Dr. Hafiz. Okay, you can see that, okay, we all experience the same thing. Kita meraih benda yang sama. Kita download journal, kita baca journal, macam-macam journal kita baca. Okay, because why? This is something yang saya rasa semua postgraduate kena alami ataupun be aware of. You cannot just simply read something that is related to your field, because you need to also understand what is happening to other area as well. Sebab apa? Bila kita bercakap pasal research, okay, for example, I would share with you one thing. If people ask you, okay, Dr. katalah I take an example here. If people ask, okay, Dr. Ko, why do you choose this variable? Why don't you choose other variables? So you have to be aware, okay, why you select this variable instead of other variable that is available out there. So bukan masa kita baca bahagian kita saja, tapi kita juga perlu baca bahagian yang lain. Okay, but that is what we experience. All the doktor melalui benda yang sama, download journal, beribu-ribu journal. Okay, tetapi tak semua kita gunakan. Kita akan select whatever that is relevant to our study. So that will be our main references. Alright. Okay, you may want to look for research that approach the topic from a variety of methods. Okay, yang ini nanti saya akan tunjukkan di hujung presentation, at the end of the presentation. Okay, I will share with you on how to actually visualize. okay, in terms of different aspect, and one of the aspect is by looking at the method. Excuse me. Okay, why we are talking about the method? Because sometimes the gap of the study can happen or can appear in between of methodology applied. Okay, for example, you might find some of the study with regards to your area that you have chosen, okay, have been done qualitatively. Okay, meaning that it's not yet been proven empirically. That can also constitute as a research gap. Maknanya pengkaji terdahulu belum berjaya, okay, secara kuantitinya, okay, meaning that secara not being able to quantify the findings. It's just merely on the qualitative basis. So that gives you some authority to further or to actually extend that research, okay, so that you can actually provide an empirical evidence. Itu pun salah satu yang kita namakan gap. Okay, maknanya pengkaji dahulu kualitatif, sekarang you start to do it quantitatively. Okay, so if you learn the philosophy of research itself, we call it the process of qualitative to quantitative. We call it a grounded theory. Okay, so that is another in terms of methodology. Okay, these are some of the tips that I would like to share. Ini berdasarkan saya punya pengalaman dan juga what I have done. Okay, it does not necessarily apply to any to all of you. Okay, you can skip any that you feel that it is not actually related to you. Okay, first, look for inspiration in published literature. So normally, we have to ask this before we can actually pursue a research topic. How do you derive to that topic? How do you come about choosing or choose that topic? That is very important. Some of us, we are just talking about research out of a dream. So itu yang berbahaya. Bila kita dah dapat tajuk, tiba-tiba tak ada literature. Bila kita dah ada tajuk, tiba-tiba literature terhad. So we have to be, or we have to rest assured, how do we derive that topic? Macam mana tuan-tuan dan perempuan, rakan-rakan semua ni, macam mana you dapat topik? Kalau betul cara dia, okay, you should be in good hands, meaning that you start dwelling into the topic, insyaAllah, okay, you'll be able to complete your study. The problem is that sometimes this topic just come just like that, okay, and then we thought, okay, I'm going to do this. But we fail to acknowledge the availability of the literature. Kita kena pastikan dulu, kalau kita pilih satu tajuk, sila pastikan ada kajian-kajian lepas, the prominent from prominent professors, okay, with regards to the topic, so that at the end of the day, we'll still have the support needed in terms of our argument or our assertion. Okay, second, maybe you can seek help from your research advisor. So this is something that is very subjective. Okay, I don't know, maybe all the other doctors can actually share their experience, because not every of us are blessed with a very supportive, very kind supervisors. Okay, some of the supervisors, they really what we call guide us from 1 to 10, A to Z. Okay, meaning that every step a proper guide. But some of the advisors, they want you to be independent. You have to search on your own. You have to read on your own. You have to summarize on your own. Okay. But my approach is that, for me, I believe that as long as you ask the right question, okay, you must be able to ask the right question. What do we mean by asking the right question in order to identify the gap, or in order to get assistance from our supervisors, is that we have to do our homework first. Okay, you cannot go to a war without a bullet. So make sure you do your homework first. Okay, buat dulu kajian lapangannya, kaji literaturenya, then you bring into the discussion. Barulah advisor tu pun seronok, happy to help. Okay, because why? Because you have shown that you have done the homework. You have shown that you have that enthusiasm to learn. Okay, and then probably maybe you can use digital tools to seek out popular topic or most cited research paper. Okay, this one I believe we should have no problem. Ataupun I think, guys, for those who are doing PhD, you are so blessed because we have all the journals, the reading materials online. Just imagine you are doing PhD 30 years back or 40 years back where internet is so much very limited. Tapi sekarang ni senang, kita just type dekat Google and then Google will actually help us to search. If you think about 30 or 40 years back, they have to do it manually. Okay, so you might not, or you might need to use some digital tools, okay, in order to come up, in order to search for literature, in order to actually make reference, make a summary out of your the journal that you have. Right, there are so many what we call digital tool software and so on that can add value to your research. Okay, and then maybe you can check the websites of influential journals. Okay, I think it is not fair for the postgraduate or for those who are doing PhD just to refer to Emerald. You need other websites as well. You need to look into JSTOR. You need to look into Science Direct, Elsevier, the deep web. Okay, in order to enrich. Because why? Because you have to be very much certain about the journals that you use, the quality of the journals, okay? And then make a note on your queries, okay? Maybe research each question, okay? So where can you locate your research gap? Okay, this is another thing that you need to, I think even me myself is still actually learning about this, okay? Because it is not as simple as ABC. When we talk about, you know, coming out with a good research, with a good research gap, a good problem statement. Okay, so where can you locate the research gap? These are some simple tips that I can share with you. So as you begin to gather the literature, you will want to critically read for what has and has not been learned from the research. So when it comes to actually literature search or literature review, okay, I always ask those who are doing this to actually read the conclusion and recommendation section first. Okay, you need to read the recommendation, the conclusion and recommendation first. Why? Because in that section, okay, normally in any publication, journal publication, the author will actually share, okay, his or her point of view of what should be done in the future. That constitute. So that is why we want you to go with current literature. We want you to go with maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years back in terms of literature, so that whatever is being recommended at the end of the journals or articles, okay, can give you an authority to further what have been done, untuk memanjangkan lagi, okay? And then use the discussion and future research section as your research gap. So this is one thing which I find very helpful. Okay, selalu kita baca jurnal, kita biasa tengok tajuk, lepas kita tengok abstract, dan we feel that relevant. Okay, no, you have to go to the conclusion recommendation, tengok future, okay, future research recommendation made by the author. So that will give you a sense of authority. Meaning that, okay, since this author suggests this to be done, so therefore I undertook apa yang dia tinggalkan tu. Okay, I undertook his or her recommendation. Okay, so in that way you can ensure, okay, first, you have the authority to conduct further research. Second, okay, you are very sure that you are actually contributing to the body of knowledge. Okay, so itu cara yang paling simple lah sebenarnya. Okay, and then continue to ask critical question of your topic. This is something that all the postgraduate need to do. Okay, tak kisahlah student ke, ataupun rakan-rakan yang tengah sambung belajar ke apa ke. So this is something that you need to do like every day as you doing your PhD. You must be able to answer all these who, what, when, where, and how question. So if you're talking about a topic, who already done with the topic? Who are the past researchers who look into the same topic? What is the variable? What is the area of concern? Okay, when was the research being conducted? Where was the research being conducted? Is it in the Europe? Is it in the US? Or is it in Asia? Or is it in Malaysia particularly? Okay, and then how? How do they conduct the research? What methodology they use? What is the approach in terms of sampling, in terms of population, in terms of measurement? Okay, so these are the things that will keep you awake while doing your research. Itu penting sangat. Kena selalu tanya diri kita. Contohnya kita dah buat satu tajuk tu. So kita kena jawab persoalan tu like every day. Sampailah kita viva. Then we are in good hands. Okay, bukan maknanya kita baca-baca tu semua dah selesai, no. Okay, so we must always ask ourselves, okay, who, what, when, where, how does this happen? What are the findings? Where was the research conducted? Who were the sample? Okay, when was it conducted? Is it 2 years back? Is it 3 years back? So these are some questions that you need to ask yourself if you are doing your PhD study or you're doing a research. Okay, and then consider what has not been explored in the study. So normally, it is a requirement in most of the publication, especially we are talking about academic writing or academic journals, for the author to actually provide a recommendation or direction for future research. So these are actually one of the way, okay, for the researcher to actually disseminate their opinion of what should be done differently. Apa yang patut dibuat lagi, apa yang patut dibuat secara berlainan. So itu akan bagi tuan-tuan dan puan-puan sedikit kelebihan. Okey, kenapa? Sebab berdasarkan kajian lepas, ini adalah cadangan. Ini adalah saranan. Okey, jadi bukannya disebabkan kita nak buat. Not because we are so eager to do the topic, but it's because of based on recommendation of past scholars. Okay, jadi that give you a sense of authority to conduct further research. And then use organizational tool. Okay, this one I think is very subjective kepada tuan-tuan dan perempuan yang sedang sambung belajar dan sebagainya ataupun berniat untuk sambung belajar. Yes, you have to be systematic. How to be systematic, that depends. If you ask me, I have my own way. If you ask Dr. Dawson pun ada cara dia sendiri. Even all the doctors, we have our own ways to organize things. Okay, so if you're talking about literature, for example, nowadays we have software. We have software that can help you to rearrange your literature. We have Mendeley, we have Atlas TI, and during my time we started with EndNote. Okay, so those are the application. And if you're talking about the practice itself, kalau saya dulu, saya lebih suka pakai scrapbook. So every time something come across my mind, saya akan tulis pada scrapbook saya. Okay, and I even have quite a number of scrapbook during my tenure with UKM GSB. So kita menulis. Sebab apa? Sebab kadang-kadang idea tu kita tak sangka-sangka sampai. Jadi kita kena put it on paper. Kalau tidak kita akan lupa. Okay, so the question is how you organize yourself. That is very much relevant. So I cannot say there is an absolute techniques to organize yourself. Because different people, they have different preferences. Ada yang suka conteng-conteng, ada yang suka type the laptop, type dekat tablet, type dekat handphone. So ada yang pula suka photostat dan sebagainya, buat scrapbook dan sebagainya. So that depends on the way you organize the information. As long as at the end of the day, okay, your organizational method tu, the way you organize things tu really helps you. That is the main thing. There's no point of you trying to adapt to somebody else's style. So masing-masing ada cara dia. Kalau tanya saya boleh katakan benda yang paling menyenangkan saya ialah scrapbook lah. So I have one in the car, I have one in my bag, I have one in my room, I have one in my bedroom. So everywhere. So when I end up, I have like 7 or 8 scrapbook. So itu bergantung. But if you want to use software nowadays, all the handphones are smartphones, so you can just actually maybe install any application that will help you to organize the information, so that will be more helpful. Nah, kalau you pandai pakai Atlas TI, you pandai pakai Mendeley, which is better. It can also help you doing citation and referencing. Okay, tapi kalau zaman-zaman dulu 20 tahun dan 25 tahun yang lalu, you tanya doktor-doktor seniors, normally dia pakai cue card dan sebagainya. Okay, which might not be relevant anymore now, but if you feel comfortable of using that kind of what we call information organizing style. So you can go with diagram. For my literature, I use mind mapping. Okay, we call it a literature mapping. Okay, so there are so many ways. So that one I will not dictate you. Meaning that tuan-tuan dan perempuan bebas nak gunakan apa sahaja method, tak kisah, selagi ianya memudahkan tuan-tuan dan perempuan, ia membantu tuan-tuan dan perempuan dalam menyusun atur maklumat. So yes, I leave it to you on that note. Okay, what is the difference between research gap and problem statement? Ya, ini banyak selalu dipersoalkan. Okay, where is your problem statement? Kenapa problem statement you tak clear? Bila dah buat problem statement, dia tanya pula, mana perginya research gap you? Tak ada research gap pun. So these are some of the popular questions. Okay, every time kita come up with a research proposal, normally people are looking at the problem statement. Okay, and if the problem statement is there, then they start to question. There is no research gap. Okay, so what is the difference? So research gap is the research problem discovered. Okay, research problem discovered. Ataupun dalam certain in different terms kita panggil dia thesis statement. Okay, you can Google lah nanti thesis statement. Tuan-tuan boleh cari sini thesis statement. What do we mean by thesis statement? So thesis statement ataupun kita panggil research gap ni is the research problem discovered, meaning that throughout your literature search, throughout your literature review, what have you found, what have you actually gathered, what have you summarized, and what have you conclude out of that literature. So that is the research gap. While problem statement is a constructed sentence on how you describe your research problem. Okay, problem statement, nama dia statement, maknanya satu pernyataan. So normally we have two different thing in our research. Kita ada apa kita panggil thesis statement, iaitu research gap tadi, dan satu lagi apa yang kita panggil sebagai problem statement. Okay, kalau saya letakkan dalam perkataan paling mudah difahami, okay, research gap ialah satu scenario, okay, satu keadaan ataupun satu what we call permasalahan yang timbul berdasarkan hasil literature kita, tetapi problem statement ialah apa yang kita akan fokus dalam kajian kita. Okay, so these are two different things and they actually work what we call secara bersama. Meaning that you have to actually identify the research gap before you can actually post the problem statement actually. Okay, that is in that manner. Okay, so nanti saya akan tunjukkan sikit lah macam mana rupa dia sebenarnya. Okay, what do you write in a research gap? So when I was given this topic, saya agak risau juga sebab pertamanya bila bercakap pasal research gap, there are so many arguments from the scholars, okay, on the issue of research gap. There are also even some scholars who says research gap is not important, research gap is not relevant. Okay, what is relevant is the problem statement. Yes, that is fine. Okay, for me, I take both view seriously. Meaning that, yes, you can say that some of the scholars, they really look into research gap. Some of the scholars, they don't really look into research gap, but they are more prone towards problem statement. Okay, but in reality, if you're talking about how these complement each other, the research gap and the what we call problem statement, okay, in order for you to come up with the problem statement, okay, saya tanya ini pada tuan-tuan dan perempuan lah, yang mana yang tengah belajar ke, yang dah habis belajar ke, even all the doctors. Okay, how do you derive your problem statement? How do you derive your problem statement? So basically, all of us, or most of us, derive our problem statement from a literature review. Okay, from our literature review. Okay, we have already read all the journals pertaining the area of study and so on, and we found that there are certain things need to be addressed. There are particular things that need to be addressed. So that is how we come up with our problem statement. Okay, so if you do it in that way, in that manner, meaning that you are actually identifying the gap first before you can derive the problem statement. So cuba fikirkanlah, style masing-masing, tidak ada halangan. So that depends. Because saya selalu cakap pada student saya cakap pada semua rakan-rakan yang tengah buat PhD, okay, it is not a big issue. Why? Because at the end of the day, as long as you understand what you do and as long as your supervising committee agree upon whatever that you have done, so that is sufficient enough and allow you and constitute some weightage. Okay, jadi bukannya satu permasalahan. Tetapi if you're talking, okay, dalam kita punya coffee talk ni katakan, kalau kita katakan, okay, oh saya dapat problem statement saya macam tu je, tak mungkin. Sebab biasanya you dapat problem statement daripada pembacaan, daripada analisa literature. So after reviewing all the literatures, then you derive your problem statement. So in another way to say that, meaning that you have already conduct the gap analysis before you can derive your problem statement. Okay. So your thesis hypothesis should address a gap which you identify in the literature, a research question or problem that has not been answered in your research area of interest. Okay, I would like to take a minute to actually address this issue. Some of the postgraduate, okay, and some of the theses that I examine, they love to put this sentence, okay, there have yet to been any studies. Okay, past researchers have not looked into this. Okay, so that's a big question mark. My advice to all, siapa-siapa rakan-rakan semua tuan-tuan dan perempuan yang sedang nak buat problem statement ataupun mungkin dah ada problem statement, you need to review this. The safest way to address the issue or problem or whatever gap that you have is by going for underexplored. Meaning that kurang, bukannya tiada. It is very dangerous to claim there has yet been a study. If there is no study, so how do you come to your literature? So might as well we say maybe few studies, maybe underexplore, maybe what we call in terms of methodology has failed to actually address. Okay, so kita try to tone down. We don't have to go directly, okay, this is the first study, I'm the first one. So that is very, very harsh. Kita takut nanti kita terperangkap. Kalau tiba-tiba examiner kata, oh macam mana you cakap ni sedangkan before this ada kajian lain. Okay, so that is just a reminder, okay, for those who are doing research. Okay, how do you write a gap statement? So a gap statement is a statement found in the introduction of a journal articles or research proposal. So basically, I would like to share my experience, like this is my experience, okay, and I learned this from my advisor as well on how to actually evaluate a thesis. So normally the first two paragraphs in a thesis, especially PhD thesis, is very crucial because within that two paragraphs, the introduction part, okay, these two paragraphs must be able to provide a sense of direction, meaning that bila kita baca dua paragraf pertama itu, maknanya kita dah jelas tentang permasalahan kajian. Okay, the research problem, the problem statement tu, the research gap. Okay, so that is very crucial. So normally, how people look at the thesis, okay, they just actually read the introduction. Okay, if the introduction fails to provide a sense of direction, okay, fails to actually provide a clear view of what you are doing, so you will be in a very big mess. So try to actually comprehend that. Okay, so it is found in the introduction section as I mentioned. And how do you write a gap analysis in research? So normally we identify the area to be analyzed, which is the phenomenon of the study, ataupun kita panggil background of study. Okay, establish the ideal future state, apa yang kita harapkan berlaku, analyze the current state, compare, okay, and then describe the gap and quantify the difference. So that is a simple way of writing a research gap. You tengok, you dah pilih satu tajuk, okay, you choose one topic, okay, and then you look at what is projected, okay, apa yang diharapkan, dan you tengok apa yang sedang berlaku sekarang. Okay, to put it in an example, contohnya kalau tuan-tuan dan perempuan buat kajian tentang online learning. Okay, online learning and student satisfaction katakan, ataupun online learning and student performance. Okay, so what we are looking at is we are looking at student performance katakan. That is what we are looking at. Okay, so what we expect or what is the future, the ideal future state yang kita nak? We hope that online learning will boost student performance. That is what we expect. Okay. Then we compare with the current state. The current state shows that student is not really performing due to online learning. So that create the gap. Okay, that create the shortfalls. That create the what we call the issue at hand. Okay, and then we actually describe and quantify the difference. So itu simple tips saja yang saya boleh bagilah if you are talking about writing or putting up with the research gap. That is a very simple step saja. Okay, we are almost at the end because I think I'm going to open the discussion nanti, okay, for Q&A dan sebagainya. If you have any question, I'll try to address it as good as I can lah, because I cannot promise you anything. I'm still learning as well. Ini adalah coffee talk kan. Okay, so this is another way. Okay, I'm just sharing this untuk kawan-kawan, rakan-rakan, tuan-tuan dan perempuan yang nak buat PhD proposal dan sebagainya. Okay, this is another way to visualize a research gap. So we put it into a table form. So instead of writing, sometimes, okay, if you were to ask me which one is better, yang menulis karangan lebih bagus ataupun in terms of visual lebih bagus. Okay, for me, I try to put it, I try to go with both. Sometimes kita menulis tetapi kita tak sedar cara kita menulis itu gagal menyatakan matlamat dia, gagal sampai ke matlamat dia. Kita nak terangkan pasal research gap tu tapi we don't know how to put it in words. So you can use this kind of visualizing research gap. Okay, meaning that you go through all the journals, all the past studies dan sebagainya, and then you put it on table, and then you provide it into a different column. You can look into the area of study, you can look into the variables being studied, you can look into the methodology, you can look into the findings, you can also look into the what we call conclusion and recommendation for future research. So in that way, later on, once you finish with the table, you can see where you can actually park yourself. Lebih jelas. Okay, yang ini salah satu cara yang paling inilah saya rasa paling efektif sebenarnya untuk menggambarkan research gap rather than you write a very long explanation and those who are reading it fail to actually comprehend or really understand what have been written. Okay, so you might want to consider this kind of approach. Okay, so pilih-pilih cara nak buat jadual dia tuan-tuan dan puan, it depends. Okay, it depends on your preference or how you want to do it. There's no issue if you want to have more columns, if you want to have more literature, it's fine. Okay, as long as at the end of the day, when people look at this visualize the table, people can actually see where is the gap that you have been actually explaining in your write-up. Alright, so I guess I'm going to stop here, okay, because actually there are so many things if you want to talk about the gap of study because it relates to the problem statement and it also relates to the methodology as well. And of course, when we talk about research gap, it is how you interpret a journal. Macam mana kita menginterpretasikan journal yang kita baca. Okay, remember that even though we might be reading the same journals, but the way the understanding is always different. Okay, some of the journals they carry a different set of understanding based on the reader punya preference. So yes, I don't know, maybe you have any question later on which I can address to you, okay, so that we can discuss further, okay, for those who want to learn more on this writing a problem statement or research gap, so you can actually do so. All right, so I pass back to Dr. Dawson.
Okay, thank you, Doctor, for the very good presentation. So now we have opened to Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can just on your mind and ask doctors. So if you are shy, you can just type on the chat box. Right. Okay. So we give you some time to think what you should ask, right? Or you want to know, or maybe you have what you are facing when you have finding the gap. So maybe you can share what is the problem that you are facing. So we try to share our experience.
Feel free to ask me any question. Okay, kalau saya boleh jawab, saya akan jawab lah. Kalau saya tak boleh jawab, kita rujuk pada doktor yang lain lah.
Yes, we have a lot of doctor in the groups, so should be no problem.
Okay guys, feel free. It's a coffee talk. Ada yang masalah belum jumpa tajuk ke, ada yang bermasalah tak tahu macam mana nak address problem statement. Just throw it out.
Dr. Izan.
Yes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Kan, let me start with the question lah kan. Kan. So sebenarnya kan, just for our friends jugalah kan. So in order for them to have a good start kan. So maksudnya kita lebih fokuskan so that they develop a good understanding on the gap first and then they come to their problem statement. So is that the sequence that they should go about in terms of identifying the gap and also the problem statement?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fadli. Okay, that is what I mentioned just now. Okay, bila kita bercakap tentang research gap dan perbezaan antara research gap dan problem statement, apa beza dua-dua ni Okay, we fail to actually acknowledge that we derive our problem statement through a extensive literature search. Okay, so whereas the development of a research gap also undergo the same process. When you do that, you have to review the literature, you have to look into past studies, you have to compare past studies, you have to summarize, you have to critiques. Okay, so it's actually the same thing. The only thing is that, okay, especially in our country, okay, because this university, they carry a different understanding. Okay, some universities are very particular with regards to research gap. So every time a candidate come in for a research proposal or research proposal defense, so normally the famous question is, where is your research gap? I cannot see your research gap. Okay, so whereas the process of research gap and the problem statement, they undergo the same process. So answering Dr. Fadli's question just now, okay, yes, it's actually you create or you find the research gap first before you can pose a problem. It is almost impossible kalau you tak buat literature review and then you come out with a problem statement. So most of the postgraduate that are having difficulties is because why? Macam saya cakap tadi, you kena tahu kenapa macam mana you dapat tajuk itu pada asalnya. Okay, if you know how you get that topic, how you come about to that topic, then you should be in good hands. The problem with us, especially me myself during my first year in UKM, okay, it's just out of the blue, I come up with a topic. And believe it or not, I have to change my topic 7 times. 7 times. Why? Because the first one is not that relevant. There's not much literature. Okay, and then it starts to evolve. I think almost all the doctors also experiencing this. Our topic actually evolved through time. Okay, through time meaning that as we go along searching for all the literature that is available out there, so our topic start to actually shape itself. Dia akan berubah bergantung kepada apa yang kita baca, apa yang kita dapat, apa yang dapatan kita daripada hasil kajian literature kita tu. Okay, so to put it in simple term, yes, you read the journals, you read the articles, you read the research paper, past research paper, okay, in order to create the research gap, will later on be translated into a problem statement. Okay, research gap is the phenomenon that you are addressing. Problem statement is what you intend to look at. Okay, so that is a simple, what we call explanation to this. So basically, yes, we are actually doing a research gap. Maybe the term is different. Right.
Okay, Assalamualaikum Doktor.
Waalaikumsalam, Tazlin.
Doktor, boleh tak kalau doktor highlightkan sedikit ataupun jelaskan sedikit, perlu tak kita, especially untuk business lecturers macam kita, bila kita nak cari gap tu, perlu tak kalau kita refer pada buku, refer pada artikel, refer pada newspaper untuk cari the current issues and relate it with the gap?
Okay, saya rasa bukan nak mencari current issue. Saya rasa saya kena ni kat situ. Bukan nak mencari current issue, tetapi nak mencari area of study itu. Okay, and answering to Dr. Azlin, okay, yes, you can refer to books, you can refer to journals, you can refer to articles, you can refer to newspaper. But remember this, for a thesis, okay, there are certain portion or what we call in terms of the weightage used. Okay, so kita tak harap you gunakan solely depends on newspaper. Let me share my experience. Ada satu experience yang I lalu reviewing a paper for a journal. It was a paper from the Middle East. Okay, it was a paper from Middle East. I will not disclose the topic. Okay, the reference come to shock because why? There is only one reference made. Bayangkan satu journal, satu artikel submission untuk satu journal antarabangsa ni, hanya ada satu sahaja reference dia. What do you expect to happen? Should I accept that paper? Boleh tak saya terima dengan satu reference saja? 14 muka surat kalau tak salah saya. Satu saja reference dia. So we are talking about research. We are talking about research publication. We are talking about academic publication. So you cannot do that. Because why? For you to derive to a problem, okay, you kena membaca dengan banyak. Dan if you're talking about PhD, sorry to say, okay, you cannot just read 15 or 20 articles and come up with a topic. You have to go more. You have to go beyond that. Okay, and then answering to Dr. Azlin question just now, yes, you may refer to, but to what extent? Okay, to what extent? Because there is another thing that there's another issue in hand because we need to ensure in terms of reliability, in terms of credibility. Surat khabar memang saya rasa tak credible sebenarnya. Okay, tetapi kalau it is white paper, for example, report by Bank Negara Malaysia, report by Malaysian Insurance Institute, report by all these relevant or professional bodies, so mungkin boleh digunakan. Tapi kalau tiba-tiba research thesis you 50% semua daripada kerajaan akhbar saja. So is it quality? Is it good enough? Okay, does it stand? Of course not. Right? So yes, you can refer because sometimes, okay, another thing, when we talk about reference made to textbook, sometimes yes, we do need to refer to textbook. Why? Because some of the constitutive definition is in the textbook as well. So you might find the definition of term in the textbook. So in that note, yes, you also need to refer to few books, for example. But newspaper, I don't think so. And it is very much disputable later on in terms of credibility, right? So might as well you go to stick to academic journals.
All right, okay, thank you, doctors.
Okay, another thing that I would like to share. Okay, I would like to share this view of mine for a few minutes. Okay, if you're talking, like I mentioned to you just now, there are so many different school of thought with regards to the gap of study. So is gap of study important? Okay, while some scholar might look at it as not important, so you have to answer this. This is what I said. As a researcher, we have to actually practice. We have to train ourselves to ask this question. So let me give you a question. Okay, if gap of study is not important, so what constitute your research or your PhD? Okay, what is the contribution of your research? What is the what is the contribution to the body of knowledge? What is the contribution to the contextual? What is the contribution to the existing theory? So ini benda paling basic tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, rakan-rakan semua yang mana tengah buat PhD sebagainya, yang dah dapat PhD tak apalah, it's another issue. Yang tengah buat PhD, yang tengah nak menghadapi proposal defense, yang tengah nak menghadapi viva, so these are the things that you need to actually answer. Because if you want to have a peace of mind with regards to your PhD or your research paper, your thesis, okay, these are the questions yang you kena tanya. What is the contribution of your research? This is a very popular question. I think Dr. Dawson will agree with me. Because at the end of the day, okay, the examiner are very much interested to how you contribute to the body of knowledge. Okay, if you manage to clear that one, I can guarantee you it's a minor correction. I can guarantee you it's a minor correction, meaning that there's no fundamental flaws. The gap is clear, the problem statement is clear, research question is clear, manage to answer the research question. Okay, but if you cannot answer that simple question, kalau saya tanya, okay, contohnya saya tanya, Dr. Dawson, what is the contribution of your research to the body of knowledge? Itu memang soalan yang paling ngeri sebenarnya. Because if you cannot come to that, what we call level of contribution, I don't know what else to say. Because we are supposed to be professed in our field. Okay, so if you say gap of study is not that important, so try to answer that question while you're doing your proposal kan, sambil tengah buat proposal tu kan, tengah buat macam pening kepala tu, you tambahkan pening sikit lagi. Okay, you tanya diri you, okay, what actually constitute your research to? I think last week there was one person asking in the doctorate support group, okay, what constitute a PhD? Soalan dia, what constitute a PhD? So this is no time to be joking around lah kan. Saya tak kisahlah, tak ada contribution, tak apa dan sebagainya. No. Okay, in order to get a PhD, permanent head damage, okay, you must be clear of your contribution to the body of knowledge. Okay, all right.
Okay.
And another thing, for those who have the intention to publish, for example, you want to publish in Q1, Q2, Q3, and so on. Okay, all the index journals, corpus, whatever. The gap of study is very important in defining the novelty of the paper. Okay, so cubalah fikir-fikirkanlah. Ini saya share saja. Saya bukan rajin menulis pun, kan. Tapi if you want it to be accepted in established a prominent journal, yes, that is one of the things. Because the gap of study will actually define the novelty, the originality of your paper. All right, thank you.
Doctor, we have a question from the chat box. We have a question from Puan Rohaiza Kamis.
Okay.
Gap can be empirical or theoretical, right?
Okay, this one I think the doctor must come to I think we need a further discussion, but let me put it like this, Puan Nora Mimah, yes. Okay, Puan Rohaiza. Okay, let us put it like this. Like I mentioned to you just now, okay, it can be empirical, it can be theoretical. Okay, but both of them are actually theoretical gap. So the theoretical gap, okay, dia boleh datang daripada perbezaan daripada segi apa? Segi metodologi yang digunakan. Dia boleh datang daripada segi sampel yang digunakan. Dia boleh datang daripada geografi yang digunakan. Dia boleh datang daripada variable yang digunakan. So these are the different in terms. So that is why I share with you just now the table tu. Okay, in order to acknowledge these differences, okay, in terms of what? In terms of area being studied, in terms of variable chosen for the study, in terms of the methodology, in terms of the sampling method, in terms of the sample, okay, for data collection, in terms of the measurement, in terms of what we call analysis. Okay, so it can come from different point of view. Okay, so even if you look at the research design itself, okay, if you look at research design itself, okay, so if you're talking about the 6 element of research design, the purpose of study, the type of study, the what we call the time horizon, okay, the setting, that can also be declared as gap of study. But, okay, tuan-tuan dan perempuan, rakan-rakan semua, okay, we are talking about a PhD thesis. That's another issue. If you're talking about a research paper for your publication, so there's no issue. But if you're talking about your PhD thesis, so it must be clear in terms of theoretical gap. Okay, that theoretical gap, okay, meaning that, what? Meaning it involves theory, it involves variables, okay? And even some university does not acknowledge in terms of sampling. Why? Because this is called a contextual gap. So they don't acknowledge this in order to confer a PhD. So a PhD must be better than that. You cannot say, okay, dulu kajian buat dekat UK, sekarang saya buat dekat Melaka. Itu konteks, It's a different context sahaja. Tapi tidak layak untuk diberikan PhD katanya. Bukan saya kata, itu universiti punya guideline. Okay. But if you say, okay, previously a study was done in US involving, okay, 7 variables. So, but now you are going to conduct such similar study, except that you add 1 more variables. So that actually contribute to the current state or the current body of knowledge. Harap menjawab soalan Puan Rohaiza. Saya tengok macam ni, Nurul Zamratul, let me address Dr. Dawson.
Ya, boleh.
Okay, Nurul Zamratul, Assalamualaikum doktor. Macam mana nak buang rasa perasaan aku tak pandai research, so tu yang mind block saya. Oh, ini senang. Kita coffee talk kan? Okay, Nurul Zamratul okay, no, tak ada orang yang pandai buat research.
Betul.
Betul tak Dr. Dawson?
Yeah, agree.
Tak ada orang yang pandai buat research. Semua orang tak pandai buat research. Okay. Kalau dia pandai buat research, dia tak perlu lagi memikirkan apa sampling method yang akan digunakan. Dia tak perlu lagi memikirkan macam mana nak buat literature review. Because every research, okay, depending on the research question or the problem at hand, okay, they have different approach. So different approach require you to explore more. Even if you're talking about analysis. So now people are talking about what? People are talking about PLS, partial least square. Okay, so SPSS is no longer sufficient to support. SPSS is no longer relevant except for the data, what we call as a data platform. So people are talking about the new things. And even if you're talking about the qualitative study, they also have software. Okay, so if you, kalau Puan Nurul Zamratul merasakan tak pandai buat research, sebabnya hanya satu saja. Sebab Puan belum mencuba buat research. Percayalah cakap saya, Puan cuba buat research, insya-Allah jadi pandai. Alright. So there's no issue Puan Nurul Zamratul. Relax je. Betul tak Dr. Dawson?
Yeah.
Kalau saya just nak tanya on behalf of our friends jugalah kan, kita just nak simplify lah. And so maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Maksud dia kalau kita nak letak macam contoh lah, senang kalau kita letak contoh. Katalah kita cakap pasal isu, cakap pasal current common issue lah, macam retention lah for example. So kita study pasal retention, kita baca empirical, LR kita baca. Lepas tu kita tengok banyak study sama ada they go for quali ataupun they go for quanti. And then we can see the gap there. Oh, maybe I can pursue a mixed method. So yang tu dah satu gap. Meaning that is part of kita punya contribution, theoretical contribution yang kita boleh bagilah kan. And then bila kita baca pula variable, ada pula literature yang cakap pasal nak cope ataupun nak curb the issue of retention ni, maybe dia suggest nak tengok isu leadership for example. So kita fikir macam, oh there is another empirical ataupun theoretical gap dari segi variable yang kita boleh tambah. So dekat situ kita dah ada build up theoretical gap kita dari segi metodologi, dan juga kita boleh dari segi kita punya variable. And then bila kita nak build up kita punya problem statement pula, kita baca, and then kita find out that yes, the issue of retention ni among in certain industry, contohnya dalam manufacturing is increasing for the past 5 years kan. So maybe kat situ then kita nampak okay, this is kita punya theoretical gap yang kita nak address. Kita dah build up dari segi method dan juga variable, and then bila kita sampai kepada problem statement tu, we talk about the current issues surrounding kita punya contextual environment. Kalau kita buat study di Malaysia ke, what is it about the retention in Malaysia that has become a problem that we need to address? Maybe adakah dari sudut konteks bila kita berfikir daripada sudut macam tu, we can clearly identify okay, this is kita punya gap yang kita cuba nak keluarkan, which will contribute to kita punya theoretical contribution dan sebagainya, and then okay, this is how we are going to address the problem statement which is in line dengan kita punya theoretical gap.
Okay, thank you Dr. Fadli. Okay, so first and foremost let me address with regards to the current issue. So the current issue is actually a guide. Okay, it's actually a guide for you, or is actually a situation where give you an authority to conduct a study. Itu sebab tu kita kata based on the current issue, based on the current reading tu. Okay, so that is one thing. Okay, and second one is yes, adding variables. For example, past researcher have looked into 5 variables, and the other researcher has also looked into 4 more variables. So in all, it's 9 variables. However, this variable has not been combined together. And that is in separate research. So if you undertook that, so that is also a contribution. Boleh dikira sebagai gap. Meaning that instead of addressing differently 5 and 4, you combine kan. Ataupun you mungkin ambil 2. Okay, but let me be clear about this, and then hopefully all of you will have a good view on this. Even the framework for research also, okay, there are different types of framework. So we have one that we call a theoretical framework, and we have the other one what we call a conceptual framework. So that one also must be properly defined, meaning that you have to understand, okay, if you happen to do or to choose variables which have not been proven together, so that constitute a conceptual framework, no longer a theoretical framework. Okay, but yes, if you have variables add in, or you maybe have variables which actually apply to other places we have not been tested in Malaysia, for example, yes, that can be a research gap. And with regards to the method, okay, so this is one thing. Sorry, I'm not offending anybody. Okay, the mixed method issue is something that is very vague. Because why? Because currently there is no what we call scholar which acknowledge the mixed method. Because there are only 2 methods, either is quantitative or qualitative. Okay, tetapi tak ada masalah sebab di Malaysia, yes, kita banyak universiti that have gone into the what we call mixed method. Why? Because mixed method provide the best what we call approach in terms of grounding a theory, in terms of triangulation. Okay, that allows you to actually to deliberately match between the qualitative data and the quantitative data. But as for the theory, as for the body of knowledge is concerned, it has yet been acknowledged of the what we call a mixed method. But there is a certain school of thought, especially on the Oceania region, which acknowledge this, and even the UK have already embarked on this what we call qualitative method. And yes, again, it can also be a gap to be addressed, meaning that instead of just looking quantitatively and qualitatively, you come to a conclusion, or you come to a point where you want to address both in one research. Yes, Dr. Fadli, that is also what we call a contribution, meaning that it's not in theoretical part, but it is on the methodological part. Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Let me address ni, ada lagi soalan ni. Ada beza tak gap analysis for quantitative and qualitative research? Okay, for qualitative research, yang ini saya nak address satu benda. Okay, Puan Nur Zamimah. Okay, point Nur Zamimah. Okay, normally for what we call a qualitative research, selalunya kita merujuk kepada SLR, Systematic Literature Review. But in the actual practice, dia adalah benda yang sama. Meaning that we address the gap, okay, either is quantitative or qualitative, but we still apply that what we call the literature review methodology. Maknanya kita review literature dan kita come up with the gap. So there is not much different. Tapi kebanyakannya if you're talking about the kualitatif, dia lebih kepada systematic literature review which derive. Okay, yang ni saya rasa kalau Puan Azamimah boleh baca lebih lagi, because when we talk about systematic literature review, it's like a process by itself. Okay, di mana systematic literature review itu akhirnya akan menghasilkan permasalahan kajian dan akhirnya menjurus kepada persoalan kajian. So that is what we call by SLR. Ini adalah satu method, dia bukannya normal literature review lagi, dia dipanggil satu method. Tapi hasil dia, Puan Zamimah, dia akan keluar lebih kurang macam jadual yang saya tunjuk dekat last tu. Itu hasil dia last kali. So kalau tak percaya nanti boleh Google lah. So that is to what ni, because so many people is now started to claim that they have done or they have conduct a systematic literature review, but normally it apply on the qualitative instead of the quantitative. Alright, so mungkin nanti boleh tengok balik. Okay, Puan Rohaiza, saya akan share nanti table tu, saya akan share slide saya lah. Just ambil je slide tu. Okay. Norlela, Puan Norlela, ada tips tak nak pilih tajuk PhD? Perlu area yang kita minat or current issue? Mohon pencerahan. Okay, if you refer to Sekaran, if you refer to Zygmunt, if you refer to Salkin, if you refer to Veerapandiyan, okay, basically when we talk about choosing a topic, kita nak pilih tajuk nak pilih tajuk. Saya selalu cakap dekat student, nak pilih tajuk ni macam nak pilih calon hidup. Macam mana kita pilih calon hidup kita? Of course kita nak pilih yang senang, kita nak pilih yang sedap mata memandang, kita pilih yang selesa. So normally we don't actually encourage even PhD student to embark on something that they are not familiar with. Okay, we usually urge them to go with something that is within their interest. Okay, cuma permasalahan dia di sini, okay, walaupun at your interest, but if you fail to actually address or actually practice the good regime, maknanya you gagal untuk train yourself to read, train yourself to analyze, train yourself to summarize literature, pun tidak akan bawa kita ke mana. Okay, so at the end of the day, yes, just do whatever you feel comfortable with. Maknanya puan tahu bidang tu, puan tahu area tu, that is better, that give you the advantage daripada kita embark satu bidang yang kita tak tahu langsung. Nanti kita akan teraba-raba, we start to actually search in the dark ni, lagi melambatkan. So normally kita ambil saja. And on that ground, ada juga yang tanya saya, kalau kita bercontohlah macam Dr. Fali cakap tadi, kajian tentang retention, kalau saya nak buat juga retention, boleh tak? Sedangkan ramai yang dah buat. Boleh, sebab nama pun research. Research is to search again. Research. So kalau you baca Umar Sekaran ataupun you baca Salkin, okay, research is based on the work of others. Di situlah kita dapat literature, di situlah kita mengkaji literature, dari literature lah kita dapat gapnya, daripada gap itulah kita dapat persoalan kajiannya. So there is no issue. But if you ask me whether the topic should be within your interest or current issue, yes, try to put it within your interest lah. Within your interest. Kalau current issue kan tiba-tiba orang cakap tentang politik Amerika, kita tak tahu, dah susah juga. So pilihlah satu yang dekat di hati lah. Macam tu saya cakap kat student, kalau nak pilih tajuk research, biarlah macam pilih calon suami atau isteri. Okay, sebab kita nak hidup dengan dia lama. Kita nak hidup dengan dia 3 tahun. Just imagine kita hidup dengan orang yang kita tak suka selama 3 tahun. Boleh tak? Okay, so harap tu menjawab soalan Puan Nolela. Okay, Dr. Suhaida Amin, kalau pilih tajuk yang kita suka, passion kita tinggi, jatuh kita akan bangun balik pengalaman saya. Yes, Doktor, yes. Okay, this is something that all PhD students should, kalau ni lah, kalau tuan-tuan dan puan tengah buat PhD, ya dah habis PhD tak payahlah kan. Yang tengah buat PhD, this is one word you have to carry all the way. Perseverance. Perseverance. Regardless what happened. Okay, regardless what happened, just try to hold on. Okay, so tak payahlah don't compare. This is another thing that I want to share with you. Don't compare with other people. If they can graduate in 1 year, if they can graduate in 2 years, if they can graduate in that on time, whatever, don't compare that. Okay, kenapa saya macam apa tadi, Yoyo tadi, Puan Nurul Zamratul kan, don't compare yourself. Just do it at your own pace. Relax sahaja. Ingat, kalau kita start to compare with others, we will not get anywhere. So try to actually work within our own pace. So itu saya rasa menjawablah soalan-soalan yang ada ni. Okay,
Right.
Dr.
Okay, do you have any questions to ask? Any more questions?
Ada soalan-soalan, ada yang mungkin menghadapi masalah sekarang ni lepas dah defend proposal, dah kena repair pula dan sebagainya. Atau kemusykilan lain. I hope I be able to address all the question correctly. Okay, but yes, this is another thing that I would like to stress to all my colleagues ni. Okay, just be patient. Okay, be patient and have that perseverance. Okay, Dr. Muhammad Hafiz. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In the fastest way, can we find research gap from the variables independent and control of the previous paper and related it to our research? Okay, Dr. Hafiz ni biar saya takut orang semua confused pula tiba-tiba ada control variable. So normally control variable are only used in finance or accounting research. Okay, in a normal business or management research with regards to social science, kita jarang ada control variable. Okay, sama juga dengan extraneous variable. Extraneous variable pun dia ada level-level tertentu saja. For example, mediator, moderator dan sebagainya. Ya, Dr. Hafiz, memang kita boleh go through the variables. So dalam satu jadual yang saya kongsikan di slide yang terakhir itu, okay, you can see the gap analysis based on variables. Okay, meaning that you can actually identify the research gap by comparing the variables. Okay, the only setback when you compare variables, you have to be sure that your literature is already exhaustive. Okay, we don't want to be missing. Suddenly, the examiner say, "Oh, I noticed that there are other variables. Why it's not included in here?" So that one you have to be very careful. Yes, meaning that kita mesti boleh tengok variable, tetapi kita kena pastikan we have already covered all the possible variables that is available. Then we can say yes, there are some variables which are we have not yet been tested and so on. And literature must be exhaustive.
All right, okay. I think they have no more question, right?
All right.
Okay, so if we have no more question, then we'll have thank you, right, doctors, for sharing his knowledge, and we have a very good knowledge sharing and knowledge passing in our universities. So hope that after this we have more and more candidates registered for a PhD program. Right. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody, to attend this coffee session. So now you can go and have a coffee break and sit down and think back.
Have your own coffee break.
Yes. So you can sit down and think bunch of coffee and then rethink back what you have, what you can receive and digest. So again, don't forget that we have a feedback form. So I think our committee will.
Dr. Dawson, let me interrupt you for a moment.
Yeah, it's okay, no problem.
Dear friends, colleagues, okay, I hope that, like Dr. Dawson mentioned just now, I hope that for those of you doing your PhD, you can complete your PhD on time or maybe over time, regardless, as long as it's complete. And for those who intend to go for PhD, go now while you're still young. And if you need any assistance or if you need to discuss anything with me, my room is always open. Okay, you can just drop by anytime so that we can discuss further. Regardless of whatever that you want to ask, I will try my best to assist you. And I hope to see more doctorates in our faculty. So guys, thank you very much for spending the time listening to my coffee talk. And hopefully we can see again from time to time. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you again. So again, reminders to do the feedback form. So your feedback will be very valuable for us to improve our coffee talk for today. So and thank you again. See you next week. Next week we have another coffee talks. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a safe and healthy days.